Hey guys, this is Miss Curry and we're going to be continuing with some rhetorical grammar, continuing on with the sentence patterns. Today we're going to be focusing on the optional adverbial, questions and commands, and punctuation. If you are not familiar with adverbial or you don't remember what that is, please go back and look at some of my earlier videos that explain that to you. So let's get started. Okay, so a quick review of the basic sentence patterns. These are subject plus be plus adverbial, subject plus be plus subject complement, subject plus linking verb plus subject complement, subject plus intransitive verb, subject plus transitive verb plus direct object, subject plus transitive verb plus indirect object plus direct object, and subject plus transitive verb plus direct object plus object complement. Okay, so these are the units that make up the sentence pattern formulas, and we think of them as the basic requirement for a grammatical sentence. In other words, a linking verb, like to be, requires a subject complement for it to be a complete thought. If you just have the subject and the linking verb, we have a fragment and not a complete sentence. Just like a transitive verb always requires a direct object. All three of these sentence patterns have a direct object. But there's another important unit that can be added to all the formulas. And like we talked about this in the last video when we talked about the intransitive verb. And that is the optional adverbial. This is a structure that adds information about time, place, manner, reason, etc. Okay, so basically we're going to take a look at the different patterns and how the adverbial works within those sentence patterns and how you can add them and create more complex sentences. Okay, so pattern 4, the intransitive pattern, these sentences rarely appear with just the subject and the intransitive verb. Dogs bark, Mary laughed. We don't see them. When writers use them, it's to call attention to those sentences. So when you see them in, let's say, a passage that you're doing a close analysis of, you know that the writer wants you to pay attention to that. So we add adverbials to this pattern to make the sentences more interesting. Okay, so here we have some sentence patterns where we've added some adverbials. So we have Gina's dad was a pilot. And we've added a prepositional phrase to that, during the Vietnam War. During the Vietnam War tells us when Gina's dad was a pilot. All right, our second sentence, we have because a weasel is wild, it should be approached with great caution. We've added a dependent clause here, because a weasel is wild. This answers the question, why should it be approached with great caution? And it gives us additional information to the weasel or it. Number 3, we have yesterday the teachers called the students lazy when they complained about their assignment. We are beginning with yesterday tells us when, and what did he call the students? Lazy, and when they complained about their assignment. So we have 2 adverbs and a dependent clause. Number 4, we have this morning I got up early to study for my Spanish test, and we have to study for my Spanish test is an infinite phrase, and then we have the adverbs early and this morning. So adverbials, refer to any grammatical structure that adds what we think of as adverbial information. So it adds the kind of information that adverbs think. In the first and second example, we have prepositional phrases, and then we have dependent clauses and infinite phrases. And adverbials can be any of these. It's not just adverbs. And it's important to recognize that when we use the word optional, we're referring only to grammar, not to the importance of the information in the sentence. If you remove the underlined adverbials from the sentences we looked at before, you're left with these kind of sketchy sentences that may be grammatically correct, but it doesn't give us the kind of information that we need. So let's take a look at some new sentences. Here we have a demonstration of the versatility of the adverbial. In the first one, we have, my friends and I have pizza regularly. So this gives us information about frequency. And then we have, my friends and I have pizza with persistent regularity. This, again, adds information about frequency using a phrase. My friends and I have pizza for breakfast, lunch, and dinner nearly every day of the week. And my friends and I have pizza whenever the mood strikes. Okay, this one is like kind of a clause, or you can do like a combination. You know, all of these depend on what you want to say and the writing situation. It's not that the information in the adverbial is not important, but if you lift it out of the sentence and you just say, my friends and I have pizza, that's a complete thought, and grammatically that's correct. But one of the best things about the adverbials is that they are movable. You can move them around the sentence, and it changes the cohesion and regularity of your writing. And the placement of adverbials, just changing that from sentence to sentence, can help your paragraphs be so much stronger. Okay, so we're going to do a little bit of practice. So I have 8 sentences here, and I want you to identify the sentence pattern, including the optional adverbials. I'm going to give you a few minutes. Please pause this, and when you're finished, come on back. Okay, so I've put the answers up, and we can see the variety of using adverbials. So we have, many people now consider the penny a nuisance coin. We have our subject, many people consider the transitive verb, the penny, the direct object, a nuisance coin, an object complement. It gives us additional information about the penny. All right, second sentence, early Lincoln pennies are very valuable today. Our subject, early Lincoln pennies, our to be verb, are, and our subject complement, very valuable today. The next one, during World War II, the government requires large amounts of copper for war production. We have an adverbial followed by a subject, a transitive verb, a direct object, and another adverbial. Number 4, we have a subject plus a transitive verb, a direct object, and an adverbial. Number 5, subject, transitive verb, direct object, and adverbial. 6, subject, adverbial, a to be verb, and another adverbial. That one is a complex sentence. The copper blanks for those 12 pennies were already in the press hopper when the production for the zinc-coated coins began. So our subject, the banks, and then we have were. So really, were already in the press. That's a simple sentence, but adding all these adverbials makes it much more complex. All right, the next one is those 12 1943 copper pennies, subject, linking verb is became, and then subject complement, collector's items. And then even our final one, even after 100 years, the production of the Lincoln penny continues today. In this, we have the subject, production, and the intransitive verb, continues. Adverbial today, adverbial even after 100 years. So this, knowing how these sentences work, gives us a lot of versatility. Okay, so another thing you can do to help you master the adverbial is to take a look at those sentences that you just did in the previous exercise and revise them by shifting the adverbials around the sentence. See when you move it how it makes sense or how it can change things up. And you can see that you may have been getting stuck in these patterns that you use over and over. I'm sure you have favorite sentence patterns and you don't even realize they're your favorite sentence patterns, but you just repeat them in your paragraphs. And by training yourself to change things around, you're going to make yourself a better writer. Okay, so now we're going to move into questions and commands. And the two-part structure that we've been looking at in sentence, subject and predicate, it underlies all of our sentences in English, even those where that structure is not necessarily obvious at first glance. For example, in questions, which you may remember from middle school days as the interrogative sentence, the subject is sometimes located in the predicate half of the sentence. So to discover the two parts, you have to recast the question in the form of a declarative, another flash from the past, from middle school, a declarative sentence or a statement. So if, for instance, the question, which chapters will our test cover? You change that into a declarative statement. Our test will cover which chapters, and then you can tell the sentence pattern: subject, transitive verb, direct object. All right. Sometimes in a command, we have that same problem where there is the you understood as your subject. So hold the onions is your command, but you understood, you understand that, we're talking to you, is actually the subject. And then the transitive verb is hold, and the direct object is the onions. So questions and commands are not structures to worry about. I'm sure that you're experts at giving commands and asking lots of questions, but it's just something to be aware of as we continue to dive into rhetorical grammar. Okay, so now we're going to move on to punctuation and the sentence patterns. And one of the kind of important lessons to be learned from these is that you don't mark boundaries of the required sentence units with punctuation. And this is where a lot of people make mistakes by putting in too many commas. So you never use a single comma to separate the subject from the verb, the direct object from the object complement, an indirect object from the direct object, or a verb from the subject complement. And the only exception, with only one exception, you never separate the verb from the direct object. The exception is if you are going to do a quote. So he said, comma, quote, I love you, period, end quote. That's the only exception. Otherwise, you would never put a comma there. So if you just have, let's say, weasels stalk rabbits, you don't put a comma between stalk and rabbits. Okay, so even though the separate units can be long and can require like the pause for breath, that doesn't mean that there's any place for commas. So I know that a lot of you use that rule. If you pause to take a breath, that's a good place to put a comma, but that's not really correct. In a lot of cases it may be correct, but what happens with that is you tend to overuse the comma and make mistakes grammatically. So let's look at some examples of those long sentences where there's just no place for a comma. The images and information sent back by Voyager 2 have given our space scientists here on Earth enough information about 4 of our distant planets to keep them busy for years to come. So here, you may think that, here on Earth, you may think that a comma would go here, but that is not correct. There's no comma in this sentence. Grammatically, it does not need one. Let's look at the next one. Every sports writer who saw the preseason contest between the Buckeyes and the Aggies said that it was a game that will be remembered for a long time to come. Okay, that's pattern number 5, and you do not need any commas. You don't put one between Aggies and said. You don't put one after said, because we have a that, and you just don't separate it. It doesn't fall into our exception. So I hope these little rules of comma is helpful, and that this will improve the punctuation in your essays. Now, what about when do you actually use a comma? You use one to set off a modifier. Okay, so occasionally we encounter sentences where the punctuation needs to be within a unit. So you're not doing it between things, but within. So we have, my roommate who grew up in New York City is named Peter Piper. In this case, roommate is the subject and the verb is, right? The to be verb. So we actually have an adverbial here, a modifier between the subject and the verb. In that case, you can put commas around it. Here's another one. Weasels, because they are wild, should be approached with great caution. Here again, we are inserting the modifier between, like the adverbial is between weasels and should, the subject and the verb. And in that case, you can put commas around it. In both cases, the only reason for the commas is to set off the modifier. The rule is about no commas is commas between boundaries, the big boundaries of our patterns. Okay, so let's do some more pattern recognition practice to make sure that you're on top of the sentence patterns. So go on and read these sentences and see if you can identify the sentence pattern. Subject, direct object, indirect object, subject complement, object complements, what kind of verb, etc. Take a few minutes, put this on pause, and when you're done, come back and check your work. Okay, so here we have our answers. Our first one is subject plus transitive verb plus direct object. Our second is subject plus a be verb plus a subject complement. Our third, subject plus transitive verb, indirect object, direct object. Number 4, subject, intransitive verb. Our fifth one, subject, transitive verb, direct object. Our next one, subject plus transitive verb plus direct object. The next, subject, transitive verb, direct object, object complement. And our final one, subject plus transitive verb, direct object, object complement. So please, if you had any problems with this or you misidentified one of the sentence patterns, go ahead and go back and review, because these sentence patterns are the foundation for rhetorical grammar, and everything that we're going to be doing from this point forward is based on your knowledge of them. So please be sure that you feel confident in your ability to recognize these things. Okay, well, thanks for listening to this video, and if you have any questions or concerns, please feel free to drop me an email, or if you're in my class, you can always stop by and see me after school. Good luck, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you.